Hi, everybody, and welcome in. It's live. It's the Colin Cowherd podcast. Our Sunday night ritual, John Middlekauff, a former NFL scout with the Philadelphia Eagles. He has his 3 and Out podcast. We chop it up for about 55 minutes. And let's start, John. The draft order for those draftniks out there, and it really came down to the last second. Chicago, Washington, New England, 1, 2, 3 will all take quarterbacks, I presume. Arizona 4, Chargers 5 won't. Marvin Harrison. Chargers may move down or take the tight end out of Georgia, Brock Bowers. They need a tight end. Then it's Giants, Tennessee, Atlanta, Chicago, Jets round out the top 10. Jets need a left tackle. They may move up, actually. I could see the Chargers and the Jets potentially making a trade because the Jets need a left tackle, but it should go quarterbacks heavy in the draft. So any thoughts right out before we get to the playoff picture? Any thoughts on the draft? Chargers look like to me the team that literally needs to go down. They don't need a left tackle, a quarterback, or an edge rusher. And this draft at the top is loaded. I think they have to move down.
To me, they would have Brock Bowers or a big-time skill guy written all over them. I think that's fair to say. Maybe an edge rusher. Bosa's been banged up. Mac's not going to be on the team. But to me, we get asked constantly, who are going to be the top quarterbacks. We don't know who's going to be making these choices. I mean, the Bears situation, I'm sorry, I didn't really buy into the last month. I know they were playing better on defense. Look who they were beating. The quarterback has thrown 5 touchdowns since the middle of November. Like, he's gone. Like, he's not going to be their quarterback next year.
Yeah.
Who is Eberflus back for sure? I mean, by the time people are listening to this, who knows? I don't think it's a lock. Ron Rivera's done. Who's going to be their coach? Could it be Belichick? I know there were reports saying that it's not going to be him, but everyone's reporting Belichick's out. So you're talking about 3 teams. Even if we assume Eberflus comes back, to me, Justin Fields is gone. They're taking a quarterback. Who is the guy making the decision in Washington, New England? I mean, obviously Washington's going to be blown out everybody. New England's had the same human being for 2.5 decades deciding everything. I mean, that is, now I don't expect it to happen on Black Monday, though it's possible. That's one of the bigger stories in the history of the NFL. I mean, when a guy like Bill Belichick's no longer their coach. So to me, until we find out who their coach is, I have no clue what quarterback they'd even like.
So let's start with this. Let's start with Chicago. I mean, at one point, Justin Fields had 89 yards throwing midway through the third, awful on third down, 4.2 yards a play. They gave him an excellent tight end. They got him another tight end. They gave him a number 1 receiver. O-line's middle of the pack, serviceable running backs, more than capable offensive coordinator. This is not one of these Bryce Young situations where you may not like him. He's got nothing to work with. They furnished Justin Fields with more than enough, more than C.J. Stroud arguably has. C.J. Stroud didn't have 4 starters on the O-line the first 3 or 4 games he played. It was a mess. So, and he has a defensive coach similarly. So I watched Justin Fields today. One of the things that's so obvious is Jordan Love, sees the field really well. Now, he can be erratic and inconsistent, but I watch C.J. Stroud, Jordan Love. They see the field. I watch Justin Fields hold on to that ball on third down. John, it's a Zach Wilson thing. We've both been on this. Some guys, it's just they either don't see it, they don't let it rip, they lack confidence. But I watch Justin Fields today. I'm like, guys, come on. Who are we talking about? It'd be one thing if Bo Nix was the best quarterback in the draft.
For sure.
We have like guys that appear to be like Penix is at least generationally accurate. Like, it doesn't even look like most college guys. Caleb's this is a rocket athletically. So would you bring Eberflus? We're both on Fields isn't the guy. You can get a 2nd-round pick. Atlanta needs a quarterback. Ritter's very weak. What do you do with Eberflus in your opinion?
Yeah, to me, he's gone. I'm all in for Jim Harbaugh. Now, is that an actuality with, Kevin Warren there and the way the Bears are operating? I don't feel confident, but to me, that's the no-brainer move. He's played there. He's thriving in that kind of region. The Big Ten guy. I go all in for Jim Harbaugh. And to me today, like obviously two quarterbacks, when two teams are playing, the quarterbacks are never on the field at the same time, but one comes on, the other comes off. So you can kind of evaluate him perfectly
Yes,
throughout the game.
I did all day.
To me, that was easily the most interesting game of the day. I
Yep.
couldn't wait for it. Fields is an athlete that plays quarterback. Jordan Love is a quarterback who happens to be an athlete. I mean, what they've done, LaFleur deserves credit. He made some throws today that you're like, damn, is that little Rodgers? I mean, sometimes that's been thrown out there, but he was doing that today.
Yep.
His pocket presence, he'll move, but it's a little more calm and sliding where Fields, he runs. So sometimes he runs right into pressure instead of just sliding left or sliding right. He does not have a feel for that. To me, I just don't think he's not a calm player. Now, he can make some highlight throws. If you just took 5 plays today that were on the highlight, they'd be as good as any plays today. Running left, throwing across his body, a striking. Like, when he runs, he's an elite athlete. He's just not a very good quarterback when it comes to throwing from within the pocket, where Jordan Love has kind of shot off like a rocket ship. I think they had 10 games to go after their bye, and Gutekunst said, these 10 games are going to define this guy's career for Green Bay. And he defined it. Like they got their quarterback. They're going to the playoffs. They did what they couldn't do last year, right? Win and get in at home against a divisional team. And he was awesome today. He made some of the best plays of the day by far.
Yeah, and so, it's interesting. So in the NFC, San Francisco gets your bye. There's only one bye now, Baltimore in the AFC, San Francisco in the NFC, Dallas and Green Bay. So I think it's the reason I don't like Green Bay in the spot. They're the youngest team in the playoffs by a chunk. Young teams generally don't go on the road and win playoff games. They can. Cincinnati did a few years ago, fairly young. But Dallas also is an extraordinarily good and confident home team. So I would take Dallas over Green Bay. My guess is the line's like -3.5, -4. What say you on that game? I just think Green Bay, it's a big, I think getting to the playoffs, you have to be so happy where Green Bay is. They found their quarterback. Their young receivers are twitchy and fun. Joe Barry, it probably gets moved. But I do think in the rare instances, John, just getting to the playoffs is a win. And I think of all the playoff teams, the Texans and the Packers.
Totally with you. They can lose by 20 this weekend.
Yep.
No one should frown. No one should be mad, and they won't be. Green Bay is an incredible to go from Favre to Rodgers to what has potential to be just a 10-year, 15-year starting court. It never happens. I mean, the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life was Montana Young Garcia. And if this guy's just Garcia, they're in great spot. And honestly, he looks a little better. So I'm with you. I don't like the Packers defense looked good today. They were playing a quarterback who struggles. Dallas, who was kind of on cruise control today, throws up 30 points with their eyes closed. So that's a matchup that, I mean, couldn't you see them losing by 20 plus points? I mean, that's going to be very, very difficult.
Okay, so we start with that, and we're going to do some NFC stuff before we move to the AFC, because I started this tonight. I'm going to do some commentary by solo on that on Miami and Buffalo. So let's go to Rams at Detroit, which is a riveting opening round playoff game. Jesus, Stafford goes back home. It's Goff against Stafford. This is a tough one. I think I don't love this. I'm prone to take Detroit. But I'll tell you the fascinating thing about the Rams, who have lost once I couldn't tell you the Baltimore loss.
Yeah, which they easily could have won.
Should have won. A special teams mistake. Rams' only loss in forever is Baltimore. Baltimore has destroyed Miami, destroyed San Francisco, destroyed Seattle, destroyed. Rams went in there, early game, West Coast team, early East Coast game, and outplayed them. So much of me wants to take Detroit. Where do you lean on this?
Well, I mean, as we're recording this right now, we'll have to see where Detroit's injuries come out. I mean, their star tight end was out for the game with a knee injury. If he doesn't play, that's a massive blow. One of their good defensive players, the high draft pick from, I think, Alabama, he got injured. They had suffered a lot of injuries today for a game that they did not need to win. Especially, you had to assume Washington was going to lose to the Cowboys. And I know Dan Campbell, the mindset, and I know Laporta was chasing a rookie record, but that is a massive, massive blow. And one thing I jotted down, Puka Nacua, usually one individual changes your team as a rookie. It tends to be the quarterback. right? Like what CJ Stroud did for Houston. Who can Nakua help change the Rams? I mean, think how long they've been waiting for a second weapon outside Cooper Kupp, and he's just basically another Cooper Kupp. I mean, you get two guys that can get 110 catches with their eyes closed. He set the record today. They were crying. He was awesome. Now they have a backup quarterback. How about Carson Wentz today? He looks kind of capable.
He looks really capable.
He made himself a lot of money today because there were a lot of questions about him, the attitude and stuff. You go to McVay like Baker last year. You act like a good guy. You're humbled. He's definitely one of the best 64 quarterbacks in America.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm with you. I got to see where these injuries come out. I would have just taken Detroit, assuming they were all healthy. But if you tell me they're missing Laporta, the Rams, the way Stafford's playing, they're going to have, is there a hotter team? Them and the Packers. But the Rams, like you said, the level of play, who they've been playing, how well they've been playing, even today to win with their backups against the Niners in kind of impressive fashion. They were down. They had a game-winning drive. They forced a turnover at the end. Like, they're kind of just vibing right now. So I might take the Rams when it's all said and done. And I'm a Lions Dan Campbell supporter, but I did not like the injuries today. And that matchup, I think I'm taking the Rams as we sit here today.
Well, here's the thing. Both offenses are explosive. Puka, Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams, Tyler Higbee, Matt Stafford, McVay's brain. And they have, Detroit's got it. What worries me about Detroit, and the Rams do some of this too, you can beat both these secondaries over the top.
Yeah.
So my take is you're going to have some points. That's going to be a really good game with some points. What worries me about the Rams, though, God, their special teams are a liability. The Baltimore game. So I look at that Detroit Rams game and I see 30-27, and I can tell you McVay's big concern is even if we don't give up something over the top, because the Rams are young in the secondary and they've been burned over the top. You saw Detroit today got smoked over the top multiple times. That I fashioned that as one of the best opening playoff games we've seen in years. Rams-Detroit could be 33-30.
We don't know the times as we're recording this. I'd put that on Monday Night Football. I think that'd be pretty cool. Lions-Detroit, first playoff game in forever. First time they've won the division in forever. Getting Matt Stafford, their former quarterback, who had some success with them, who was part of one of the more famous trades probably in franchise history. I hope that's the Monday night game because that would be pretty cool. And remember, just a couple years ago, the Rams played on Monday Night Football against the Arizona Cardinals, ended up winning the Super Bowl.
Okay, so Philadelphia, a 5 seed, will go to Tampa.
Wow.
Tampa's got a puncher's chance, playing with house money. I don't like what I see from Philadelphia. You take Shane Steichen out of Nick Sirianni's career, and he looks over his head. This team's getting worse by the week. That shit today was embarrassing. And I've always liked Tyrod Taylor. Boy,
Baker's limping around is the only problem.
He is. I would have said Philadelphia before that game, but the way it turned out, you're like, what is going on? It's like players almost quit.
I know.
It's like, is that a message by them? Who would you take, Philadelphia or Tampa?
Well, A.J. Brown injured. Hurts dislocated a finger. No team has worse mojo right now headed into the playoffs than the Philadelphia Eagles. And listen, your big thing is offensive coaches. And I agree with you. Now, I'm not totally opposed to defensive coaches. The right guy, Vrabel's proven to be legit. Yeah. D'Amico's a star. My defensive coach, if he's young, right, under 50, has to be a play caller. What happened Saturday night? D'Amico's calling the defense. Shane Steichen's calling the offense. I'm not looking for a CEO that's 41 years old here in the NFL, right? If it's, Bill Belichick, some of these, Pete Carroll, I get it. Jim Harbaugh. Nick Sirianni is a CEO head coach. He's like 42 years old. What's he bringing to the table? His motivation's clearly not working. So schematically, we saw last night, everyone's crushing Shane Steichen at the end of the game. He called the timeout because he knew the defense. He was playing mental games. Him and D'Amico were going at it. They were scheming up against each other all night long. And he called the right play. The guy just dropped it, bad pass. To me, I don't really know what Sirianni's doing. He's pacing around. They're losing. They're leaking oil. He has no ability to patch that leak right now. And it's getting worse. There are more leaks popping up. Like you said, you could argue that, they're probably assuming the Cowboys are going to win. So maybe they didn't take the game as seriously. But that effort was gutless. Like they weren't even trying. They might as well have just said, hey, we'll just give you guys the win. We'll just walk off the field.
Look at the effort the Rams had today with Carson Wentz. It was a stupendous effort. I always think when you mail in an effort, you disrespect your boss. If I had my last show at Fox, let's say I'm 70 years old, I'm leaving Fox. If I mail in my last show, that's disrespecting my boss.
Who didn't try today, Colin? Every game. Arizona's trying. Even Jacksonville lost. They're trying. Everyone today, whether you were in the playoffs or not, it's football. No, these contracts aren't guaranteed. All these coaches, everyone tries. To me, they were the one team that Atlanta, I mean, they're kind of a disaster. But to me, Philly, like, where's your pride? What's going on? Especially, you know you're playing next week, right? You're not a bye team. It's not like this game doesn't matter like you're the 49ers. To mail in an effort like that, with the way everything's been going, I don't know. To me, Philly can lose at any moment. And I don't love the matchup for Tampa to beat Philly. Hope, maybe Baker gets a little more healthy because to me, he looks, like 50, 60, 70% max, and he's not talented enough to overcome that. But yeah, I wouldn't put any money on the Philadelphia Eagles right now. That's for damn sure.
No, would you though? I said this last week. I would have no problem. Baker struggled with injuries. He's one of those guys that plays, he's got some alpha. Sometimes you'd be like, slide, get out of bounds, don't wait. Sometimes he'll take a hit because it's part of his chutzpah. It's part of his sort of his shield. It's part of his personality is I'm a tough guy. I'm one of you. And there's almost a Jim McMahon quality to it. You're like, Jim slide. Jim took some shots. I would give Baker, I'd have no problem, no misgivings giving Baker a 2 to 3 year deal if it's in the threes, 31, 30. I mean, Garoppolo got a deal, and I think Baker throws a better ball than Garoppolo. Would you have a problem with it?
That number seems a little high to me. I mean, ideally, I'd like 115. but again, the quarterback market can get weird. Who are you really bidding against with him? At those type numbers? I mean, we'll see. The quarterback market always changes. Like you said, Jimmy Garoppolo. The difference with Jimmy, though, you can nitpick him all you want. I mean, he's not good anymore. He had been a part of a winner. People, the teammate, no one ever questioned him. No one ever had any issues with him in terms of internally in the locker room. I know Baker doesn't now, but there were a lot of question marks. To me, could you get for like under $20 million just 1 year? I would try to take a deep breath and not try to overreact. Now, he wins a playoff game, a 2-year deal. To me, it's like $40 million and maybe guarantee 25 or something. You like him. Where's he getting? This guy just played for $4 million. So, if you just factor in where you're at, I would try. You've seen some of these happen with those mid-tier guys when you overpay and it kind of goes the other way. Because the other thing with Tampa, I mean, they have some older players. So is this kind of the end of the rung for their kind of run?
That's a good point.
Of in a transitionary time? Because sometimes you do that. Then all of a sudden you realize, well, we're not quite the same team as last year. Is Mike Evans back on the team? You have some turnover. Then you're like, God, I wish we wouldn't have done that. But he clearly has ingratiated himself to Jason Light. I mean, Todd Bowles, you got to give him some credit. I know the division sucked, but they won it for the third straight year. To win it without Tom Brady, New Orleans got to be kicking themselves because they had no business not winning this division. That's pretty embarrassing. I know a lot of people act like Dennis Allen's coming back, and clearly Dennis Allen's just fine. And in fairness to New Orleans, they didn't want Sean Payton to leave. That's why you had to trade for him. They would have liked to keep him. But that's, Derek started playing well these last couple of weeks. Where the hell was that in the middle of the season? He just plays something like that in the middle of the season. They might win this division by a couple games. And to me, I would take them a lot more seriously the way they're playing. So Philly might get lucky that they're playing Tampa, not New Orleans right now.
Yeah, no, Derek has played better in the last month. And, it's a new system, a defensive coach. It could have taken longer. I really do think that New Orleans has the most talent in the division. I think they're the best team, but we've seen this before. A quarterback gets hurt. I mean, I don't think Pittsburgh is a very viable playoff team. They're a one and done to me. I think New Orleans could win a playoff game. I actually think Seattle kind of could win a playoff game. Tampa with a banged up Baker Mayfield. I don't know. So let's kind of pivot over here to the AFC. So the biggest story of note, Jay Glazer reporting that, Belichick's gone. They're going to meet 7:30 Eastern time. That's 4:30 a.m. our time, that Belichick is going to meet with Robert Kraft. And Jay reporting he's gone. I kind of look, there's a term that states have used in the center Midwest part of the country called the brain drain. When your college graduates leave, and they go to New York and LA and San Francisco and the coast and Florida, and it's called a brain drain, and your state gets older, people more reliant on social services, and the college graduates, young, smart people leave. I think this is what Belichick went through. Dante Scarnecchia, best O-line coach, along with Bill Callahan in the NFL, leaves. Yeah. About the same time, Brady leaves, and Josh McDaniels leaves, and Ernie Adams, one of the smart guys upstairs. You had a brain drain, and they were mostly Dante, Josh, and the GOAT, Tom, on the offensive side of the ball. And as a defensive coach, he's just not equipped to be able to replace those. So what does he do? He replaces a lot of people with what he's familiar with. A Son, a Joe Judge, a Matt Patricia. He replaces, not with the best on the market. He replaces them as an older coach in his 70s on who he knows. And I think it was a NFL brain drain. He lost. Brady is playing chess. McDaniels, for all the negatives,
Grid OC.
Go to Dante, probably the best O-lineman coach. I've talked to multiple guys that had him. It's like, Colin, it's just different. And so I think, I don't think Bill's great with personnel, the draft, but that's how it comes to me, is he's just not equipped to reboot this franchise offensively. Is that too harsh?
No, I think there were two downfalls of him. And number one, like you touched on, his unwillingness to go outside the Patriot way when it came to coaches. Andy Reid will hire a linebacker coach from Kentucky, right? He hired Sutton before he got Spagnuolo to be his defensive coordinator. Eric Bieniemy, they had never worked together. He was a running back coach bouncing around different places. He didn't know him, but he was willing to go outside of just the people that he knows. That doesn't mean you can't bring in people you're comfortable with. Belichick is unwilling to do that, right? Look at this year. He needed an offensive coordinator desperately. There are a million Shanahan cronies all over the place working for him all. He could have got one of those young guys and just maybe tried to spice things up. Who'd he go with? Bill O'Brien. He was unwilling to go. He didn't even entertain. It was a lock. Like, who's going to be his offensive coordinator? Everyone's like, Bill O'Brien, Bill O'Brien, Bill O'Brien. And to me, the other thing, and this goes back to Brady, he is Walsh 2.0, right? Sold a year early instead of held on a year late. And he had wanted to short Brady for a long time. Now, Brady's an all-time outlier, so he was always going to be wrong on shorting Brady as the stock. But he did have Jimmy Garoppolo, who he felt comfortable with, and he did not want to leave. But Brady, by winning that Super Bowl and the power that he had at the time, until that 19 season, Belichick got a little more juice to do it, but Jimmy was gone. So he had his... I'm not saying Jimmy Garoppolo, Steve Young, he's clearly not, but he had his transition guy there that he knows he could have played with and competed with. Because if he just had a capable quarterback, how many games did Belichick lose this year? Like 9-3, 10-6. It's not because he doesn't know what he's doing. His offense is a joke, and he can't change that, and he's unwilling to hire Bobby Slowick or the next Shane Steichen. He's not going to do that. He just refuses. To me, why I like Bill Belichick somewhere else is because he could just hire Josh McDaniels back. Like, his offensive coordinator's available, which is the Patriot way. He's his guy, but we know they work together. So to me, unwillingness to hire any coach that has not started at 22, 23 years old for Bill. And two, the quarterback transition, he fucked it up. And some of it was out of his control, but once Jimmy left and he told Brady to go, they didn't have an answer. Remember, he had to go with Cam Newton. And then he just took Mac Jones at 15. Like, you don't take Mac Jones at 15, but he didn't have a choice. Like, what else was he? He was desperate at the time. And that was the other thing. They were never over the Brady, especially that third part of the dynasty. They never felt desperate. They never got in desperate situations. And that's what he's felt like the last several years. Just always signing guys for a lot of money. He doesn't feel comfortable doing that. No quarterback situation. He cut Bailey Zappi at the end of the preseason, and that guy played half the season. So it tells you what he thought of him to begin with. So it usually doesn't end well, right? Phil Jackson, Bill Belichick. This is usually kind of how it ends. Pete Carroll. Is he in trouble?
You'd said something earlier, staying in the AFC, that I prefer offensive coaches, but there is a history that if you have a top defensive coach with a top 8-9 quarterback in his prime, you win a lot of Super Bowls. So there's no question defensive coaches work. DeMeco Ryans gets the right quarterback. They have the balance.
Yeah.
So
John Harbaugh, Lamar.
I'm overwhelmingly for offensive coaches, but I do think let's pivot now to the Charger job. So there's going to be 8 to 9 openings. That's clearly the best opening. Harbaugh's not going to look at 7 of the 9. He's just not going to look at 7 of the 9. So that tells you the only guy with huge options stay in college, go to pro. The guy that's going to have $15 million offers at both places, or at least in the NFL, he's going to look number one. He'll look at the Raiders a little because they do have some nice offensive pieces, and they'll give him an open checkbook, but he's going to look at the Chargers. So they got a left tackle, a weapon, a couple edge rushers, though Khalil Mack's probably gone. They'll keep Bosa and Justin Herbert. So in this instance, I would like a head coach. You've tried with Anthony Lynn, Mike McCoy, Brandon Staley. I do think they need a head coach. So this is the instance that I would be comfortable with Dan Quinn, Tomlin, Vrabel, or Harbaugh. I can make an argument, John, that Vrabel's a really good choice here. So what the Chargers haven't been forever since Marty Schottenheimer was there is physical. Marty, I mean, I remember talking to Charger players like our effing practices are physical. They're brutal. This team doesn't have a physical component. They've got the big names, the toughness, but they don't play tough. If you had the option, Vrabel, Belichick, Harbaugh, would you go Harbaugh? Because I think Vrabel would get a lot of consideration for me.
I would go Jim Harbaugh in a heartbeat. To me, he's the number one. He's the number one guy in the market right now. I mean, he wins. He is an offensive guy, though he feels much more like a defensive lineman or something. He's a can't miss. I don't hate the Vrabel thing, and I think there are a lot of parallels. Talking to people that have been around Vrabel, like Jim Harbaugh, his bravado and alpha when he walks in a room sucks it all out, and he intimidates a lot of people. It's hard for GMs. It'd be hard for the Spanoses, like with Harbaugh. That these guys are big personalities and they're big human beings, right? So that they are intimidating guys. Vrabel, if he leaves Tennessee, which clearly is on the table, it's because he wants to leave, because he doesn't like things aren't going his way. Like he wants control. It's part of what Jim's going to want, right? He's going to want control. It's what Belichick's had forever. It's what Pete likes. So I think he would be a guy that would make the Spanos also a little uncomfortable. Like he's an uncomfortable guy. He's a Belichick guy. He's a Urban Meyer guy, like Bill O'Brien. He thrives being uncomfortable. But that's what the Chargers need. Like, let's face it. They have kind of gone the comfortable route for a decade now with some of these guys, and it has not gone well. And I always get back to they've invested all this money in the quarterback to not go, listen, if you can't get Jim Harbaugh, if you get Mike Vrabel, I'll give you a standing applause. I mean, that's relative to what you had. I mean, you can't even compare the two. You can't pay the quarterback $200 million and not do everything humanly possible when it comes to the coaching staff to go after the best. And whatever, if Vrabel's going to cost $100 million, because I'll tell you this, if Vrabel would be interested in Ohio State, they'd probably fire Ryan Day tomorrow and give Vrabel $120 million. So it's just, he's going to have options for a lot of money. Whether he's, we could argue until we're blue in the face how much these guys, who cares? These are line items when it comes to the amount of money this media deal's bringing them. This is not even profits. This is just extra money to throw at people.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look, the NFL this year paid like $425 million to each team after it was all said and done.
The salary cap's like $210 million. Well, you're not paying your scouts that much money. I'll promise you that. So, what a president costs $2 million? What does it really cost? It doesn't. To fill your whole building, you don't even have that many people working for a football. People don't realize, like Dean Spanos or Robert Kraft, or how many people do you actually have working for the team full time besides your coaching staff and your players? Not as many as you think. The doctors don't work full time, right? The trainers, the scouts, presidents, some salespeople, but it's not this isn't Microsoft. So when you say $420 million, if your salary cap is $220 million, you probably could pay the rest of the building for 10, 15, I guess your coach and stuff, $25, $30 million. I mean, you're talking, you could easily spend and make that 30, make it 50 and not even see anything in your bank account. So Dean, they have to, with the quarterback, especially Sean Payton's going nowhere. And Andy had the worst season in, Chiefs in like a decade for the Chiefs, and they'll probably win a playoff game. So it shows you where they're at. They're not going away. So the Chargers better not screw around. And the Raiders, I do believe Mark Schoen, if he sits with Harbaugh, he's not going to be just sitting with him to have a sandwich. I mean, he's willing to pay. He gave John Gruden $100 million 7 years ago before $100 million were getting given out. Yes.
It's really interesting about the Chargers job. Obviously, you're going to have Peyton in it. You're going to have Andy Reid in it. So you're going up against some, brilliant guys. But the best job openings in recent years, Matt LaFleur got Aaron Rodgers late prime, but Aaron's a lot of work, and you have no owner, and it's a bad free agent city. And that's about as good a job opening is. You get Aaron late prime. Dallas, McCarthy's a pretty good job, but it's a semi-meddling owner, and Dak's limited. This job, I get an A quarterback, a non-meddling owner, a team that spent money on Bosa, Khalil Mack, Jackson, the corner that whiffed. This is about as good a job. I mean, and the other thing that's interesting, John.
Salary cap has some issues.
They're going to move off Derwin James, Khalil Mack. Yeah. They know that. They're going to have to hit on some draft picks. The other thing that cannot be dismissed, it's a good coaching market. Vrabel's out there potentially. Belichick's out there. Harbaugh's out. You have these years where like Dan Quinn with the Dallas Cowboys is the best candidate available, who's a good candidate. He didn't win much without Kyle Shanahan. But this has to be considered. The Chargers have the 5th spot. So this is a quarterback, left tackle, and edge rush heavy first round. They don't need any of them. They've got a Bosa. They got the Thule kid from USC. So they have 2 defensive linemen they love. The Chargers could move down 2 spots. Tennessee could move up to where the Chargers are. You get a 3rd round pick, a 2nd, 3rd round pick. This has draft capital. You got to work your way through some salary cap stuff. Quarterback, left tackle, weapon, edge rusher, non-meddling family. John, I'm trying not to be a Southern Cal homer. This is a really good job opening.
Well, like for Dallas, for example, for Mike, that's a pressure cooker, right? If something we're at Sirianni, he's going to get eaten alive if this goes bad, right? Green Bay, that's an intense job. You better win there, or you'll get run. Chargers kind of under the radar. I mean, they stuck with Brandon Staley after last year. I'll promise you, the Philadelphia Eagles would not have. Jerry Jones probably fires him after that situation. He's getting fired in a lot of places. So you could argue just under the radar job. We talk about him a lot because we love the quarterback, but in terms of they don't matter that much in the market, right? Their brand for like television ratings isn't that important. Their owner just, they would pay. They'd have no problem giving $15 million if you could just guarantee him like back-to-back playoff appearances. I mean, that's all the church. They just can't get to the playoffs back-to-back years. So if you factor that in the expectations, the other thing with the quarterback is like there aren't questions, right? Good kid, elite talent, has already proven that he can succeed in the NFL, right? Productive, successful in terms of throwing touchdowns, can make all the throws. He's been durable. There aren't really question marks with the guy. Like sometimes, like if the Eagles job became available, it's like, is Jalen that good? Is he truly a 45, 50 million? I think some guys would ask, he would have people that would be interested, but it would be somewhat risky, right? He's done it 1 year where you've seen really since Herbert showed up, he was really good. And that's with guys constantly in and out of the lineup.
And bad coaching.
Yeah. If you ever could just get some consistency with his offensive personnel, the sky would be the limit. So yeah, I mean, I think we knew that Sean Payton wanted the job last year. They just wouldn't get off Brandon Staley, and they probably at the time weren't quite mentally ready.
They acknowledge I've talked to multiple people with the Chargers. They acknowledge they should have run him out. They do now. It's a mistake. And he was, the classic, always smartest guy in the room. They were getting annoyed with him. He'd done some weird analytic stuff, but he got to the playoffs, and for the Chargers, that was at the time enough. But I think the Chargers are the first to acknowledge, hey, we should have probably moved off him last year. By the way, it's not the worst thing in the world, given a young coach, thinking he'll grow into it. Most people thought he would grow into it. They lose the opener to Miami in that wild shootout, and you're like, okay, that's okay. Miami's got a good offense. But by week 3, 4, 5, you're like, God, they're giving up chunks of yards to bad quarterbacks. So I don't crush the Chargers for that, but in a strange way, it's a better coaching market this year for the Chargers, and so it worked in their favor.
The one thing that worries me with the way we're going in the sense of how much coaches cost, right? You're paying 15, 17, 18 million dollars for these guys. The GM is basically just a player personnel guy. He's That's GM right. and title only. And let's face it, a lot of coaches struggle in the draft because they view it's hard for them to not have like an instant gratification view of a guy. Can this guy help me immediately instead of kind of the 20,000 foot view that usually personnel people are better at? Well, once I start paying 15, 17, 18 million dollars, the coach has all the juice. And it's just a situation. And listen, Kyle Shanahan had it, but John proved himself and they became a balance. Andy Reid, John Dorsey, Brett Veach, he listens to those guys. Even Pete over the years when he's listened to John, they've done well in the draft. And a lot of these coaches, like, is Vrabel listening to anybody? If you give him $16 million a year, Jim, what's unique, he's going to know all these kids. So in the draft, he's more prepared, like Pete is. So you'd feel a little comfortable for like the first couple years. That's why Pete set themselves up on that run. But a lot of NFL coaches, I got news for you, aren't the greatest personnel evaluators. And you talk to these GMs, sometimes they butt heads with these guys. Like, I can't talk this guy out of this player. But once you start paying that guy $16 million, who's the owner going to side with? Right? I mean, the highest paid employee. There's only probably a couple players on the team that are going to be making more than some of these coaches.
All right. So we've broken down the NFC. I do want to spend a few minutes on Michigan, Washington. So, because this was the last year of the 4-team playoff, they're transitioning to 12 teams. I didn't have any problem leaving Florida State out. You didn't have to answer for years about it anymore. Their final thing was, let's just get these 4 teams in. We think they're the best teams along with Georgia, but Georgia lost the last game, and c'est la vie. That's life. I loved how Washington matched up against Texas, and I did pick Michigan narrowly over Alabama. The line movement is telling me that the wise guys are on Michigan. I do like Michigan ball controlling Washington here, although I think Washington, because I don't think any college team has 3 good corners. So I just think Washington's going to be able to score. And especially if they're scoring late and Michigan's protecting a 10-point lead, Washington's really going to move the ball down the field. So Michigan has to be an aggressive team. You cannot take your foot off the gas with Washington's coach, their quarterback. So let's start with that. I like Michigan sort of 30-26. I think the line's appropriate, but I do like Michigan, and there's going to be points. It will not be Texas-Washington. It won't look like that. It'll be much more physical, much more between the 20s, more field goals. But what say you on the prediction? I'll take Michigan.
Well, you're talking to the biggest Husky fan here, because when I went to DraftKings and they said they all listened to the podcast, I might have spread $1,000 on them 7-1, so I'm rooting for them. Now, if I had to bet after the Texas game, like I'm not betting on this individual game. I just took it because of the value. And Joel Klatt, I heard him on your show. This Michigan team built themselves for that C.J. Stroud explosive Ohio State team. So they're built to handle this. Now, listen, this is Jim Harbaugh, to me, is never going to get a better opportunity to win a championship. And that might come even when he makes it back to the NFL in the Super Bowl. I mean, he's a favored against a team that he clearly should beat. Now, the difference is the Big Ten's pretty bad. I mean, as we had time after the bowl season, Ohio State's quarterback got ran out of town. Penn State's quarterback, who I heard for 3 years was the next Josh Allen, was awful. Who's the best quarterback they played this year? Tua's brother? I mean,
yeah, I think so.
It's not Alabama's guy. So the only saving grace why I feel kind of good, at least having a chance, is like this offense is pretty special. I mean, Penix is, when the dust settles, unless his knee doesn't check out of the combine, like it's a degenerate knee, I don't see how he doesn't get drafted really high. And if he goes on and lights these guys up, even if they lose, I mean, you're talking about a big-time NFL quarterback prospect. And he has elite wide receivers. Now, Michigan has NFL DBs, but they have 3 NFL wide receivers. One guy who's going to go in the top 15, top 20. The other 2 are going on day 2, and they're all big. They all have great catching radiuses. Their coach, the reason I loved, and I told you this last week, Washington against Texas, I just thought it was a huge coaching mismatch. Well, I mean, Harbaugh's the real deal. I mean,
they have a great DC.
They have a great DC who's an NFL guy. They have Sharon Moore, who's a Bob Stoops guy, who's really good. I mean, Harbaugh. One thing about Jim Harbaugh, his staff is always good. You know, John can go through ups and downs. It's a little harder in the NFL. Jim's staff, from the moment he got to Stanford, was elite. So there's no coaching mismatch. Like, honestly, DuBois and Grubb are going to have a great game. They had a good game. Obviously, they kind of fell apart at the end. But can Penix, what's he been sacked 11 times? Can they get to him? Because if they don't, then to me, Washington will have a chance. If they're peppering him, remember Oregon in the game you were at up in Washington, they started peppering him in the second half. I think that's when he hurt his ribs, and over the next month he wasn't the same. But Oregon easily could have won that game because they started mollywhopping him like every other play, crushing him. And to me, Michigan's kind of built to do that. If they can avoid that. The other thing Washington's really good at, like this running back, let's say he's not even close to 60%. they can generate runs with the quick passing game, which is basically the same thing. That's what Andy Reid's always said. Like, I can run these, and Kyle, these quick screens that basically are 80, 90% completion percentage. Even if we get 4 or 5 yards, keeps the clock going and operates that as a run. And they start doing that against Texas. And no team takes those quick little screens and just gains 7, 8 yards like Washington. So they're going to have to hit those, and obviously the big plays, which are going to be harder than some of the games they've played. But I give Washington a chance just because of their offensive personnel. And defensively, I mean, Trice is an NFL guy. If you know, the Michigan's tackles aren't great. Their interior offensive line's elite, but their tackles. But is Harbaugh liable to have 45 rushing attempts and like we ain't even throwing? Because he is.
Yeah. So a side note to this, if Harbaugh jettisons Michigan, exits the college football, do you know who the number one candidate for the Michigan job is?
Would have to be Kalen DeBoer, right?
Kalen DeBoer. I read it today. So, and what's interesting is, here's what's interesting. I was told a week ago that and Ryan Day shouldn't be dismissed, but if he was, Ohio State would hire Kalen DeBoer. So here's what's interesting. This is where Ohio State's kind of screwed. Either going to face Harbaugh going forward, or they're going to make a bid for Kalen DeBoer. They may also make a bid for Ben Johnson with the Lions, although, I would take Kalen DeBoer. But I will say this about college football. And, John, years and years ago, when I was at ESPN, I had told some of the upper management, I said, you guys should go buy UFC. I said, you're living in your Red Sox tunnel, Yankees. I said, UFC is catching fire in Vegas. And they just thought it was too violent. You look up now, they could have had that thing for $400 million. It sold for $6 billion. Years ago, I met Don Garber, MLS commissioner, and I told him, I said, I would love to get a piece of an MLS team. Couldn't afford it. It's Tony Robbins, Magic Johnson, Will Ferrell. You can't own stock, you ownership in college football, but I do believe next year will be the start of an almost revolution of college football sort of overtaking baseball and the NBA. We're sitting on this playoff format, which we've known. You and I are college football junkies. We've known forever. Can we just have a 12, 16 teamer, right? And I pushed back for years on it because my argument was always, hey, there's never been a team with 2 to 3 losses in college football, though LSU once got to a natty, I think, with 2 losses.
Alabama.
There's never been a team in college football with 2 losses that I thought that's the best team in the country.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, that's not the point. The point is we love tournaments, and they're fair and they're weird and they give you great drama. I think not only is college football a stock to buy, if it's a $12 stock, it's $24 next year. But I also think the college football playoff is going to become March Madness on steroids. It's going to be NFL playoffs and college football playoffs, and then everything else in sports, like NBA, everything else domestically. That's my take on what's going to happen. Just, am I hyperbolic? Am I over the top? Because I do love college football, but I feel like, guys, it's a whole new world next year in college football.
Well, imagine if we would have had the 12th teamer this year, Ole Miss and Oregon and some of these teams that could have made some noise and just made the whole thing really interesting. I don't know where you stand on Jim. I'm hoping he stays because the NFL doesn't need him. Like, historic ratings, they could have me and you coaching teams. You get 30 million people watching if you put it on Monday Night Football. I think he's better for college football, right?
Yes.
College sports and college basketball when I was a kid in the 90s was huge. The coaches were really famous, right? Tark, Kay, Roy Williams, all these guys. And obviously college football was like that then, but even more now with the Sabans, the Kirbys, Jim Harbaugh, Lincoln Riley. So I hope he stays. And luckily, financially, there was always a big gap why guys would leave because the colleges could never match the NFL money. Now, if Michigan wanted to pay him $15 million a year, they easily could. And that video, I don't have kids yet. You do. I do think sometimes you lean towards certain kids. Clearly, his parents love Jim a little more than John. Now, Jim's a little, I think, closer to Jack personality-wise than John's a little more normal from what I've been told, even though all the Harbaugh's a little crazy. I do wonder the thing he has going with his parents living close to him, what he has in Michigan. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I hope he stays. And I've rooted for Jim Harbaugh every game he's coached since Stanford up until tomorrow night when I'm going to root for the Huskies. I think he's better at Michigan. Right now,
Yeah.
I'm not going to complain if he comes to the pros, but I do think there's something pretty special. That team, the thing that goes with both, that stuff really means something to Jim. It's why that I think that the Raiders have a shot at Jim, because I think the Al Davis, the alumni, like Jim he's a football nerd. Like it's all he thinks about 24, his family and football, like Belichick and that type of stuff. Al Davis, Bill Walsh, like this is all these guys want to talk about and be around. So I hope Jim stays, because like you said, college football is clearly the number 2 sport in America. And you have some nights where it's like, what did the games last week? We're doing like 25 million people that first game.
Crazy.
So
crazy.
And Michigan, how many teams in the NFL are a bigger brand than Michigan football?
Well, I've
10?
been saying this for years. If now you have 2 recruiting cycles in college, which it really does, it's a regressive lifestyle.
That's what's driving him away to me, the NIL, the transfer portal, some of that.
But, and I think they're putting up more and more guardrails on it. But I've been saying this from the beginning. If I had Patrick Mahomes, the NFL is better than Michigan. Dallas Cowboy job potentially is better than Michigan. Boy, and it ends right around there. Again, Joe Burrow, he's hurt a lot. Buffalo, I don't want to live there. Love you, Buffalo, but Ann Arbor's, I'm going to live there. Michigan, when it's rolling, is, especially for a Michigan man, I just don't think they're 5. I've always said this.
Well, Jim coached at the 49ers already. How many jobs are bigger than the 49ers? And he got run out of town. 5,
I mean,
maybe? Not even?
No. I mean, the Niners have great city, some generational pressure because of their success. York's a pretty good owner. Lynch is an excellent GM. So there's a handful that are better. I do think eventually college football has to figure out, and I think they will over time with a 12-team playoff, a schedule maker, and there'll be a little more reasonable fairness where, the SEC guys are scheduling Citadel 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Pac-12 was always much more courageous on their schedules. But I just don't – I think when you get to these Texas, like Sark, now, you may be disappointed and there's some pressure, but there's pressure from impulsive billionaire owners. How many jobs are better than Texas? I got to live in Austin, Texas.
And I get a alumni base willing to cut huge checks to stock my roster. How many teams in the SEC have more money than him? Newsflash, none. So it's like Sark has, you could argue now financially, him, USC, Ohio State. I mean, you could argue that college football is even going to separate more and more. These SEC teams with all the money coming in has separated over the last decade. All their sports are better now. College basketball, their basketball programs are paying $6-7 million to their basketball coaches. So, and the Big Ten is going to be like that too. The thing is, to me, once you get at Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, the transfer portal, a guy, every player is a free agent 24/7, 365, but you are more likely to keep them at those schools because you have the mechanisms in place to pay them. And it's such a special place. Like if you're a redshirt freshman, you walk out at the University of Georgia, Ohio State, or Michigan, you're like, this is where I'd want to play. You're going to transfer like Syracuse, no chance. So when you see those transfers happening, it's pretty clear. Ohio State told the quarterback, you're not going to be the starter next year. He didn't transfer because, he was mad. They told him, you're not good enough. And that's the one thing that I wonder if coaches get a little tired of just having to deal with all that. And maybe that's Jim, obviously the NCAA, but Jim's crazy enough that I could see him like the NCAA, whatever. I don't even give a shit about them.
Yeah. John Middlekauff, former NFL scout, 3 and out. This is so much fun. We've got a Sunday podcast event scheduled for the foreseeable future. I absolutely love doing it. By the way, for our listeners, I'll have Nick Wright on my Tuesday podcast, which will air Tuesday live on YouTube or Wednesday on our podcast network, The Volume. So, John, as always, it's money. I'm going to go watch the Bills-Dolphins game.
Same.
I like Buffalo, but I don't love them. Dolphins, once you lose Bradley Chubb, Phillips out, they're not going to engineer the kind of pass rush, and I think that really limits. I think when they had a pass rush that was healthy and the offense, dangerous team. Don't love them now. We saw they got wrecked by Baltimore. So I'm going to go watch that. As always, John, appreciate it.
Go Huskies.
Thanks, buddy.
See ya. I think I'll see you tomorrow.